So, the Isekai genre. To be honest, this genre is a bit too big because there's so much show in this. It's kind of hard to just pick out a few recommendations and end it because, to be honest, I like this particular genre. So, what I decided to do is I'm going to split this up into multiple videos because there's many types of isekai. And when I say many, I mean quite a few or quite a bit. So I'm just gonna get into it later on into the video. But before anything else, we gotta go through the basics first. The typical thing you'd see in isekai anime is that because it's isekai, it's fantasy, kind of go hand in hand. And then, because it's fantasy, usually it involves some form of an adventure, because most fantasy stories are about adventures. And then we have the protagonist, and because it's a fantasy, we want to be able to correlate ourselves, to sympathize and empathize with the protagonist, which is why they're gonna be dense, or else they'll be getting ladies left and right. And then there's, of course, the relationship you build with your friends, your party members, or your lovers, or your slaves. It's getting weirder and weirder, but yeah, relationships. That's the thing. But there are also other things that are not so typical. And these are as follow: gore, sex, cunning protagonists or smart protagonists, character development for anyone other than the main protagonist and the heroines, and even then, it's kind of rare for the hero or the protagonist himself or herself to get the character development. It's usually the subcast, the subplots that gets these character developments because, yeah, it is what it is. And then there's, of course, a truly original story. Many people complain about how there's a linearity between the stories, how the stories are predictable. But here's the thing. One, niche are niche because people like it. Therefore, it's okay to use niche. And then, when it comes to originality, is there really anything at this point that can still be made and is completely original? I do not think so. Even the concept of magic in itself is something that's already taken from another particular genre, another particular culture. Therefore, there's no actual true original story, which is why all you can enjoy is how the world is built different and the characters involved in the story. There are some patterns that are predictable. There are some niche that makes the character more identifiable, but all in all, without all of that, can you really call it an anime story? Not really. So sometimes what you should be thinking when you're watching a series is not what will happen next, but just enjoy the show. Don't think too much. It's an entertainment. Just turn your brain off, watch, done. And of course, because it's an isekai, most common sense that we have, which is technically speaking bound by our worlds and our worldviews, should be thrown out the window because a different world has a different common sense, which usually also gets ruined by the protagonist because the protagonist has a different common sense going for him. So, yeah, that's the thing. But the thing is, the isekai genre, as I mentioned earlier, is too big. So, we're gonna have to split them up. And the reason is, let's see, we have two anime here on this display right now. And if we're to differentiate the main characters in these two stories, one is very strong. The other one is, well, in a way, OP, but in terms of strictly the anime's powers, not so much. He will grow, yes, but it's a difference of weak to strong and strong to stronger. Yeah, that's the thing. And just with these slight differences, the story already feels so different. The color templates used, the mood, the theme of the story changes very drastically. And another one, different from the earlier examples, we have these two shows, Little Buster and Goblin Slayer. One is not so obviously an isekai, and another one is so obviously an isekai. Get it? If you don't, here's the thing. Just because the story takes place in a place that kind of feels like our world, sometimes it's not actually our world. It might be something different. And even if it's obviously an isekai, that doesn't mean that all common senses are off the table. I mean, come on, let's face it. Physics works more or less the same way everywhere. I mean, just because you're an isekai doesn't mean you don't need water, right? Doesn't mean you don't need to eat, right? Doesn't mean you don't want to get boned, right? That's the kind of thing. Some common sense stays the same. Physics stays the same. Biology stays more or less kind of the same, unless your isekai has aliens in it, in which case biology might not be the same. But what I'm trying to say is there's so many different types of isekai shows. But this show in particular will be focusing on a different genre of isekai show, particularly something with armies.